Welcome back, everybody. Tuesday, January 24th. John Arvosis here to talk to you about Ukraine and to put on some chapstick. How's everybody doing? Busy day. Good day. Very good news day, actually. We're going to talk about tanks a lot. Well, didn't mean that to be a joke. But yeah, we're going to talk a lot about tanks, which will be very good. Do your introductions, guys, if you would. I will get TikTok rolling here on my iPad. And then we'll wait for a critical mass of folks and we'll get rolling. There we go. Excuse me. Just ate before the show, so at least I won't be starving to death this time like I always am. Hello, TikTokers. Hey, Ryan. Oh, boy. So, yes, so just if anybody's new, we usually take, or watching this in replay, we take a couple minutes just to get a critical mass of folks. Usually takes about 2 minutes. Hey, James, Stovin, how are you guys? So, yes, we've got a lot of good news today. Hello, Lithuania. How are you guys? Ooh, man, oh man, oh man. Tanks. I know tanks. We're talking tanks. Hey, Radoslav. Good to see you in Bulgaria. NYC, Canada, Liverpool, Alabama. All right, guys. Yeah, introduce yourself. Say where you're from. And as I said, probably in about probably half minute, I think we'll have enough people here. We're doing pretty well. People seem to be coming quicker than normal, which is nice lately. Yeah, tanks for the tanks, Germany. Cute mustard. All right. Another couple seconds for folks to join in. Thank you for the ski. Oh, that's kind of cool with my hair. For the ski goggles on TikTok. Oh, boy. All right, I'll get rolling now. Thank you for the hockey as well. Hey, everybody. Welcome. I am John Arvosis. Feel free to keep introducing yourselves and where you're from as things go on. I am here to talk to you about the latest news from Ukraine. Today's big news is tanks and tanks and tanks. Thanks for that, Allie. The way the show works, those of you who are regular know, thank you, Annie, is for about the first half of the show, I will talk about the news. I will update you guys on what's going on, what I think is going on and why it matters. And then the second half of the show or longer, we will take your guys' questions. So on TikTok, you could submit the questions via the pause. On TikTok, you could submit the questions via the Q&A link in my profile. The rest of you obviously can use the comment box at the bottom. Super chat questions on YouTube, I will always do those as the next question, even if I'm in the news part of the show, as a thank you to you all for supporting my work. And I will always do shout outs as well when I see you guys doing gifts on TikTok. I do this for free. I've been doing it full time since the war broke out, and your gifts help pay the bills and help keep me going. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Let's get rolling. So tanks, lots of good news on the tank front, imminent. You guys know, I always try to do just the quick background so we know what's going on, right? Ukraine is worried about a spring offensive coming up. The Ukrainians themselves probably have, when I say offensive, I mean sort of big attack planned, okay? The Ukrainians themselves have a big attack planned in the spring, most likely. The Russians, everyone thinks the Russians do. In the Russians' case, they want to get back some of the territory they've lost to the Ukrainians. I say lost to the Ukrainians, the land that Ukraine got back, Ukraine's own land, they got back from the Russian occupiers. So therefore, NATO has been very concerned about making sure Ukraine has, I should say Ukraine has been very concerned about making sure that it has sufficient tanks to fight the Russians. Now, the Russians, not surprisingly, use old Soviet tanks and some newer Russian tanks. The Ukrainians have a bunch of old Soviet tanks and Soviet tanks that were upgraded a little by some of their former Eastern European neighbors. Well, in this case, the Ukrainians would be getting new Western tanks. That's a big deal because the Western tanks are much better than the Russian tanks and basically can kick their butt, which is great. Now, up until now, we've already had the French that promised to kick in some light tanks and the Brits who promised to kick in some actual main battle tanks, their Challenger 2. The Brits, I want to say, I always forget the exact number, maybe 14 or so, which is okay. I mean, it's not enough to rock your world, but added to the other tanks, it's a big deal. Now, the news that hit today, I'm going to take you through all the news that hit. So the Ukrainians have been wanting to get their hands on the German Leopard 2 tanks. In order for that to happen, Germany has to approve it. Now, to approve it, it takes a couple different things, okay? First of all, you have to have the Germans approve two different things. One, the Germans have to approve sending the tanks from Germany, right? If Germany wants to send any of its own tanks. But Germany has also sold a ton of tanks all across Europe. I think it's like 14 or so countries. And the in order for those countries, like Poland, for example, is one of them, in order for those countries to send their tanks, to send the German tanks to Ukraine, they need Germany's permission. Now, this is typical of any country. The U.S. has this kind of law. The Swiss do this. The Germans do it. Everybody does it. Basically saying that if we sell a country our weapons, we reserve the right to decide whether or not that country can give the weapon or sell the weapon to anybody else, because we don't want American tanks going to some third country that we don't like, for example. Thank you, Bonnie, for the whale there. Give you a little wave, right? So in this case, you've got Poland, Finland, possibly the Czech Republic. You've got about 10 countries in Europe that want to provide about 100 tanks. We now know there's a coalition with 100 tanks, 100 German tanks to Ukraine, but they need Germany's permission. So far, Germany's been holding out. Germany said that America would have to send some Abrams tanks, which are the top American tanks. The U.S. said no. Well, here's the news of today. Okay, Wall Street Journal first. Wall Street Journal is reporting. Thank you, Benji, for the whale. It's a whale day on TikTok. Thank you guys for that. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the U.S. may agree later this week to sending a significant number of Abrams tanks. Politico is quoting the number at 30. 30, not a bad number. Now, we'll talk later about, well, I can mention it right now. The experts disagree on how many tanks the Ukrainians need. The Ukrainians want several hundred. I mean, they've been talking, I think, more like 500. The experts I've seen have said 50 tanks would be a beginning, right? Ukraine needs at least 50 to make any kind of a difference from what I've been seeing. Then it gets interesting depending who you talk to. Some are saying 100 to 200 tanks is what the Ukrainians need. In the last couple of days, what I'm seeing is that some of the military experts are saying that Ukraine will need 300 to 500 tanks in order to really be able to make a difference with the Russians. So, and even on TikTok, I see some of you guys are weighing in and saying, 50, 300. That's sort of the issue. We don't know. Thank you, Kumsi, for the goggles. I don't know that we'll ever know. But keep those numbers in mind when I start going through what we're talking about. So the U.S., when I say may, it's being reported left and right. I will eat my hat if Biden does not approve the Abrams tanks. That seems pretty clear at this point because of all the press reporting today. So let's pretend the U.S. is going to pretend. Let's say the U.S. is going to provide around 30 Abrams at least. Okay, Der Spiegel, a very reputable German publication, is reporting that the Germans are going to approve sending their own Leopards and letting other countries like Poland send Leopard tanks as well to Ukraine. The Germans, thank you, Timothy, for the hat there. The Germans are going to be sending at least 14 tanks. Thank you, Avery, for the hat. Now, in terms of how that works, thanks, Lorenzo. The Germans had done a review recently, and thank you, Annie, for the whale. Wave for the whale. The Germans did a review recently, and it came out a couple days ago about how many tanks the Germans have that they could provide. And the German defense industry came back and said, we've got 139 tanks that we could provide. Thank you, Inspired Woman, for the piñata. That, in other words, 139 tanks that are available. Then I believe Germany may have 300 Leopard 2 tanks in total, but 139 they can afford getting rid of. Thank you, Addie. So if the Germans are only saying 14, it's a start. But having said that, I'm glad the Germans have come around. Poland has officially asked Germany to send 14 tanks. Now, from Poland, that's a big deal, right? Because countries like Poland, it's not like they've got thousands and thousands of tanks. So, and mind you, when you add Poland sending 14 to, Czech Republic, hopefully, to Finland, to other countries, it can add up to hopefully 100, 150 at least. As I said, there's about 12 coalition partners that have gotten together, 12 countries, to offer around 100 tanks to Ukraine, the German tanks. They reached this deal at the Ramstein summit that was last Friday. Remember when all the countries got together in Germany and we were hoping that the Germans were going to come through and say, yes, we will approve, the tanks, and they didn't. The good thing is, behind the scenes, I think they were basically getting ready for the Germans agreeing. Thank you, Samantha, for the hat. And 12 countries got together and agreed, once the Germans give approval, we will send 100 tanks. So that's good. couple more little details. The Dutch Prime Minister said that the Netherlands is considering buying 18 Leopard 2 tanks as well, which it currently leases from Germany to provide them to Ukraine. I don't know whether those whether that would be an additional 18 or whether that's part of the 100 that's being counted. Thank you, Big Drama. Oh, that's very cool. Oh, I haven't seen that one before. That's very neat. Thank you for that. Wow. And Flower Lady, it's whale day. Woo, wave. I appreciate the gifts, guys. Like I said, the gifts, it's funny. The gifts are a lot of fun on TikTok, but they actually do put money in the creators' pockets. It's actually significant income. So thank you for that. Because as I said, I do this for free and I am doing it full time. So your guys' gifts are helping pay the bills. So I appreciate it. So that's it on the tank front. I mean, it is very good news. Let's see the total that go. Training is always going to be an issue. Training on the Abrams tanks. You know, the concern is it's going to take some time. You cut off a little bit of the time because, well, okay, you cut off some of the time because the Ukrainians are just brilliant at using the military equipment. B, you cut off some of the time because the Ukrainians obviously know how to use tanks, though they don't know how to use the Abrams, right? So that at least gets them a little more experienced. But nonetheless, you know, they're still going to have to do Abrams training in addition to the Leopard training. Now, keep this in mind too. The guys that are training on the Leopards, the German tanks, are not training on the American tanks. So they're going to need twice as many men potentially to train on the tanks just in case, right? I mean, you get killed and then you can't use the tank anymore, right? So there's going to be some logistical issues here. Nonetheless, this is great. Yes, the Abrams are extremely heavy. The American tanks do use a lot of fuel as well, which sucks, but what do you do? This is good. I mean, across the board, this is really good news. So let me just say, and you know, we gave Germany a lot of shit, but if this comes through, thank you, Germany. You know, let's give credit where credit is due. So why the tanks matter? I was telling you guys we're worried about a big offensive coming up in the spring, both from the Ukrainian side, but also the Russian side. Oh, no, that's interesting. Ooh. Rachel throws in. Thank you, Rachel. Rachel is mentioning on YouTube, the New York Times is reporting as of 12 minutes ago that Biden has agreed to send up to 50 of the Abrams tanks. Now, the Abrams tanks are also the M1 tanks. Now, I'm trying to remember. Did I don't remember. I got to drive a tank once when I was working in the U.S. Senate. It was very cool. But I'm not remembering now which one it was. It could have been an Abrams. Or it could have been a Bradley fighting vehicle. It was either the M1 or the M2. I don't remember anymore. I've got a picture like Michael Dukakis driving my tank, but it was really cool. I mean, really freaking fun. These are the kind of fun things you do get to do as a Senate staffer, I will say. But 50 tanks from the US is freaking awesome because now, again, right, if we're talking, thank you, Big Drama, for the gift there. If we're talking 50 tanks from America, let's hope this coalition of countries gives another 100. That gives us 150. Let's hope the Germans do more than 14. If the Germans can provide 139, let's hope actually, you know what? If America's providing 50, let's hope Germany provides 50. I actually think the Germans would look bad if they gave fewer because remember, the Germans did not want to give their tanks unless the Americans provided their tanks as well. So if the Americans provided more tanks, it would look kind of bad. You know what I mean? So let's hope the Germans give 50. If that's the case, wouldn't that be cool? 200 tanks. 200 tanks starts to get, I mean, that gets real. Now, again, the Ukrainians may need 300 to 500, but still, that gets real. That's pretty freaking cool. Now the Abrams gets to be, Dark Chef is saying Abrams are already in the area. From what I was reading, thank you, Frate, for the whale. Another wave on TikTok. Thank you, guys. You're up to 5 whales today, I think. Thank you for that. One issue with the Abrams tanks, the American tanks, depending where they come from, the most modern versions of them have depleted uranium armor on them. And basically, it helps to protect the tank, but it's so top secret that the Americans, from what I was reading, would never let those tanks, even our allies were very iffy about giving those tanks to. So, depending which tanks we've got in the area, we wouldn't want them anywhere near the Russians. That's for sure. Look, they'll figure it out. This is pretty cool, though. I do hope that all of these weapons, these tanks, get to Ukraine in time for the Russian offensive. Now, the other point, real quick, I was talking to a friend of mine today who's a reporter, and one of the things that she was saying, which is a good point. Thank you, Darlene. She was noting, and she said, the experts may say Ukraine needs 300 to 500 tanks. That's assuming the Russians know what they're doing. I mean, it is entirely possible that the Russians do a horrible job in their spring offensive, right? That their weapons do horribly, that their logistics is horrible. Aflac, thanks for the duck there. Who's that? Grayson, thank you. Right? So there's, the bottom line is, though, you've got to prepare the Ukrainians and give them enough weapons, assuming the Russians know what they're doing. We can't give the Ukrainians just enough weapons if the Russians screw up, right? We need there to be enough weapons if the Russians don't screw up and the Ukrainians still have enough to basically get their country back. So pretty cool stuff. No, I'm very excited about this. It's nice to see this stuff kind of come together. Now, in terms of the spring offensive, let me look here. There's been increasing talk of, I'm going to pull out the map, get ready, increasing talk about the Russians trying to basically get all of eastern Ukraine, the Donbass. I will show you on my handy-dandy map here. Basically, you'll hear the Donbass, or you probably have heard it talked about a lot. Donbass is, let me get rid of, thanks again for that, Rachel. Donbass is two regions actually in eastern Ukraine combined. They call it the Donbass. It's Luhansk and Donetsk. Luhansk more or less is here. Donetsk more or less is here. The Russians control about 50% of Donetsk. They control, maybe 98% or something of Luhansk. And there's been a ton of fighting going on nearby here, right? Right here where my finger is where Bakhmut and Soledar are. You've heard a lot about Bakhmut and Soledar both in the last couple of weeks. Soledar is the town that looks like it finally fell to the Russians probably recently. Thank you, Natalia. Bakhmut has still not fallen, but it looks like the Russians are putting reinforcements in this area, and they may try to make a big push in the spring to at least get all of Donbass, because that was sort of Putin's original goal, or I should say one of his big original goals was at least to cement eastern Ukraine and basically steal it from the Ukrainians. And he hasn't done it. I mean, he got almost 100% of the one territory, but the Ukrainians are taking it back. And of the other territory, he only got 50%, and he's not getting the rest of it. So, let's see. Thank you, Hazel, for the plane, which actually you're reminding me. Thank you. Hazel gave me a private jet gift, and she's just reminding me that I didn't talk about planes. There has been very interesting chatter about the possibility of the U.S. sending F-16s to Ukraine. Now, it's still chatter at this point. I mean, meaning you're seeing it kind of mentioned in articles. Who knows? Who knows? It doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon. I did see one analysis today saying that it really potentially would take the Ukrainians a long time to learn to fly the F-16s, but just as importantly, a long time to learn how to service them, because you've got to keep taking care of these planes. Warthogs, I see Everglade Johnny saying the A-10 Warthogs as well. The issue of military, actually, I think you guys were the ones who told me. Now, the Warthogs, again, I'm more of a foreign policy guy, but I have learned some military stuff over the years. The Warthogs are slow and low flying planes that basically are tank killers, among other things, vehicles. They come low and they blow up tanks. But because they're low and slow, they need protection. So whether it's F-15s, F-16s, whatever, they need fighter jets protecting them. So you can't, from what I was told, you can't just give Warthogs by themselves. They've got to have, exactly, surface to air missiles, somebody's saying on TikTok, would go after them. So they're very easy to shoot down. So all of this would have to be sort of a combined package if we were to give planes anyway, let's see. It's not happening yet. But let's see. Again, I'm very excited though. This is very good. Let me tell you really quick here. Ukraine believes Moscow is unlikely to launch an attack from Belarus, which is in the north, or in southern Ukraine, although they are still building up Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital. That's some news we saw in the last couple of days, was the Ukrainians are building up a lot of defensive structures around Kyiv, their capital. Now, keep in mind, Kyiv is all the way up here, okay? The fighting is all down here. Russia controls more or less this land here. So the big fighting is going on here, and there's certainly fighting going on here as well. I mean, there's fighting all along the front here, but the big fighting is going on here and here. So Kyiv, there's nothing going on there. There was concern about the Russians invading again from Belarus. They still may, although it doesn't make a ton of strategic sense, at least from what the experts are saying. Nonetheless, just to be careful, the Ukrainians are building up defensive structures here. I would also say, my guess is that the Ukrainians are building up the defensive structures because they also want to show the Russians just how difficult it would be to try to take Kyiv now. Right. So part of this is convincing the Russians not to invade from the north, because even though the Ukrainians can take it, I mean, it can defend themselves. It's a pain in the ass. I mean, basically, it's a waste of resources. Now, mind you, it would be stupid for the Russians to do it. But if the Russians decided to invade from the north, there's a lot of defensives here. There's marshes. I mean, it's not good for the Russians. But it means the Ukrainians would have to have more troops up here to defend just in case. Right. Thank you, Al, for the hat. And more troops up here just to defend are troops that are not down here and not down here, causing trouble along the Russian lines. So the Ukrainians would rather convince the Russians not to invade at all and not have to not basically have to waste their troops in the north. Okay. I'll do a quick little update on the Discord. So one of the ways I make money, and also, frankly, we sort of created a really nice community in terms of paying my bills and everything, is we created a Discord community. I mean, I wouldn't say make money. The Discord community was actually a fun thing to create, and it has been bringing in some revenue. But one of the ways we've been bringing in revenue is with auctions. And I've got some really cool auctions going on in the Discord community now. We've been auctioning really neat stuff we've been getting from Ukraine. And the most recent stuff we've got auctioning right now, just to show you, just to entice people in. But half of the proceeds from the auction, basically we buy it in Ukraine, ship it here. Half of the proceeds go to humanitarian aid that we're doing in Ukraine. We've already channeled about $4,000 of just the auction money to humanitarian aid. And half of it goes to support my work, because I do this for free and I'm doing it full time. So, and I'm not rich and nobody's paying me. So it helps to support my work as well. But a couple different things. We've got the really cool Azov style bracelets that are the bracelets the Ukrainian government made from the steel at the Azov style plant, where the 2,000 Ukrainian defenders defended against the 14,000 Russians. They don't make these anymore because they sold out. I've got a handful of them we're auctioning off, which is very cool. The other thing, I've got the Russian warship "Go F Yourself" stamps. Now these got a little creased by Ukrainian customs, which you might be able to see if you look at it, but they're really cool stamps. Basically, the soldier is giving the middle finger to the boat, the Russian boat, and then in the next frame, the Russian boat's gone, which is kind of cool. If you look at the stamps, they're a little different. In one, there's a boat, and in one, there isn't, which is kind of neat. So we're auctioning those. And my favorite, which I will show you again, and we're going to have a few auctions of these. Currently, this is auctioning just to the VIP members, the paid subscribers, but I'm also going to have an auction next week open to the public as well, non-paying. These are my favorite Russian fighter jet shot down by the Ukrainians. How cool is that? This is my absolute favorite. I love this thing. But sold by a Ukrainian charity. But anyway, it comes in a really cool gift box that says Orc Busters on it, which makes me laugh because the Ukrainians call the Russians orcs. And anybody who knows Tolkien, J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings, the orcs are the evil, I'm probably going to get this wrong, but they're kind of elves and humans mixed in a sort of a bastardization of their gene pool, and they're big and they're ugly and they're dumb, but they're strong fighters and they're just gross. And the Ukrainians call the Russian soldiers orcs on purpose to compare them to Tolkien. So anyways, it makes me laugh. But yeah, you can go to, it's discord.aravosis.com. Also, you can find all of my links via the link in my TikTok profile. The Linktree link takes you to all of my links, including my Discord. For you guys, aravosis.com will take you there. All right, let's keep going. In other weapon news, the New York Times is reporting that in order to keep Ukraine's howitzers fighting, the howitzers are artillery units, the Pentagon will increase its production of 155 millimeter shells sixfold, so 6 times, to 90,000 rounds per month, raising ammunition production in the U.S. to the highest level since the Korean War. So that's excellent, because there's been a lot of concerns about the Ukrainians basically running out of ammunition. So that's a big deal. This next story is very interesting. And I don't know whether I wish. Let me tell you the story and see if there's anybody here who's sort of an expert on Swiss politics that can tell us, is this a nothing story or is this a something story? Because, for example, in American politics, it doesn't matter if someone's debating legislation. You want to know, is it going to pass or not, right? So listen to this. Listen to this. Switzerland may allow the re-export of its weapons to Ukraine. On January 24th, the Swiss Parliament's lower house Security Policy Commission approved an initiative to allow other countries to re-export weapons made in Switzerland to Ukraine. Now, I am forgetting what weapon it was. There was some munitions that the Swiss make. And was it for a German weapon that was already provided to Ukraine? I'm trying to think. It was a German thing that they tried to get permission from the Swiss, and the Swiss ammunition, and the Swiss said no. So that's my question as to whether this is. I mean, Dark Chef is saying nothing burger as of right now. It's ammunition. Oh, is it ammunition for the? No, it's the Gepards. That's it. It's for the Gepards. Exactly. It's for the Gepard. That's right. Thank you, TikTokers. So that would be a big deal. I just know, like I said, is it really going anywhere, or is it just some nice people trying to help in Switzerland? But overall, Switzerland already voted in favor of it. Parliament approval is still needed. Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. Interesting. Okay, it is for the Gepards, though. Okay, that's interesting. No, that would be amazing. I mean, that would be absolutely amazing. So on the corruption front, so this was interesting too. So Zelensky has been firing a lot of people in a big sort of corruption crackdown, which is good. You can look at this two ways. One, obviously, he is cracking down, which is great. Two, people like Fox News and others will try to use it against Zelensky. Look how much corruption there is. But having said that, he's cracking down. So there was a deputy at the infrastructure ministry who got fired yesterday for taking bribes up to $400,000, I believe. He just got arrested today for those kickbacks, which is great. One of Zelensky's top deputies in his presidential office resigned because there was appearance of some impropriety. Zelensky fired 4 governors around Ukraine for similar corruption reasons. So this is good. I mean, honestly, exactly. Audrey is saying on TikTok, at least he's trying. I think it's good. And I think it's, he's politically very smart to be doing this because, well, they can't afford it. I mean, let's face it, right? Ukraine's at war. Not only do we not want them wasting our money and our weapons, but we don't want them wasting their own weapons. I mean, their own money and their own weapons, right? So it's good. It's very good. Do make sure you guys follow me on TikTok and YouTube. I always forget to mention that. Click the little follow button and click the tap button on YouTube. I mean, TikTok, we like that too. Sky News. Okay, this was actually the last story I had, but this one made me laugh and I just had to put it in here. So, sorry, sip of water and then I'll tell you this one. So Sky News is reporting that the Russians, this is great. Russians who wish to leave their country by car. Now, mind you, there ain't no other. I mean, you can go by plane, I guess. But in other words, all the Russians that are fleeing the country, there's already like about 1 million that have fled. Russians wishing to leave their country by car may soon have to reserve the date and time in advance with government officials, according to new legislation that's being proposed. The Kremlin's head of transport and infrastructure has prepared amendments to the law which provide for a preliminary reservation of the date and time for vehicles to cross the border. According to the draft bill, drivers will need to make a reservation online. The procedure will include drivers providing a list of documents and the specific time they wish to leave. I mean, only Russia has so many people leaving that they've got to basically set up a system and say, okay, you need a reservation. But also, this is, I mean, how screwed up, how sad in a way, really, how sad does it have to be that you've got to stop people from leaving your own country, that basically you have to put whatever hurdles you can in the way to stop them from leaving? It just boggles my mind. Oh, actually, that's a good point. Thank you. User so-and-so mentioned the doomsday clock. I'll mention that at the end because that really pissed me off. Actually, I did have a couple other little stories here. Oh, this is an important story. The United Nations said today that Russia's accusations are total BS and a lie. Okay, they didn't use that language. I'm using that language. The UN said wrong. Russia accused this week that Ukraine is putting weapons of war inside all of their nuclear plants and blah, 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 blah. And of course, total BS. The UN went and investigated and said total BS. They said, we've got inspectors in all the plants. No one has put, at least the Ukrainians have not put any weapons there. The Russians lie. That's one of the lessons we know as far as dealing with this war. The Russian government lies, but it's good that the UN was able to at least check this quickly. So that's good. Sad news, British aid workers, Chris Perry and Andrew Bagshaw, the two British aid workers that were missing, were in fact killed in Soledar, which I was telling you is the little town near Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine where the fighting's going on. The Perry's family released a account of what happened, saying that they were attempting to rescue an elderly woman when their car got hit by artillery and killed them all. So anyway, very sad, but a good way to go if you're going to go, I guess, so to speak. They were trying to save an old woman, but really, really horrible news. And finally, this one made me laugh too, actually. Thank you, Sig Sauer, for that. This one made me laugh too. According to Sky News, Prigozhin, who is the Russian oligarch that runs the Wagner Group. The Wagner Group is the group of Russian mercenaries, the soldiers for hire, and Prigozhin is the big billionaire that's running it. Prigozhin has asked the Kremlin to ban negative media reports about the Wagner Group. Once again, Russia, democracy, niet. Right? This is not a democracy, but they love to talk about how much better they are than us. And this is what really shows you what kind of a government they have. Okay. But listen to this. They want the criminal code to be amended to make discrediting the Wagner mercenaries punishable by up to 5 years in jail. The chairman of the State Duma, who the Wagner head Prigozhin has asked to do this, who's a close ally of Putin, is already advocating amending the criminal code to allow the authorities to confiscate the property and assets of Russians living abroad who publicly insult Russia and its armed forces. So if you simply insult Russia abroad and you're a Russian, they can confiscate all of your money and your home and your car. That's the proposed legislation they're thinking of doing. I mean, this country, oh, well, we ain't like them. Thank God. Last little thing. Oh, let's talk, actually I'll do a quick little pitch about my Patreon and then I'll talk about the doomsday clock. Thank you for the ski thing there, Jill. So, my Patreon, one of the other ways you guys can help support my work, sorry, my lips have been crazy dry for a few months now, winter, is to, go to patreon.com/Aravosis, and Patreon, you'll see it with other creators too. Patreon is a neat way that you can go and basically make a monthly contribution to various creators, and you can give $1 a month, $5 a month, whatever you like. Thank you, PJ, for the ski goggles. And I've got it set up. You can simply donate on Patreon if you want to help out. Patreon.com/Aravosis. You can find the link in my profile takes you to the list of links, youguysaravosis.com. But in my case, if you give $5 or more on Patreon, you can link it to the Discord, and then you're also a VIP member of my Discord, which means you get access to the VIP auction, which is kind of nice because I've got two auctions going on, one for the public and then one for the VIP members. There's fewer VIP members, so in principle, you've got a better chance of getting stuff, possibly. Thank you, Evolving Fate, for that. So the last little story somebody asked me to talk about, and we might as well, I'll talk about this and then we'll segue into Q&A with this, is the doomsday clock. So the Bulletin of the American Scientists has had a doomsday clock for years. Now, actually, while I'm saying this, does somebody want to Google the doomsday clock and see when did they institute it? Obviously, it was during the Cold War, but when was it? What year? Just Google the doomsday clock and it'll come up. Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Look at the Wikipedia. Was it 1947? Oh, I hope it was that late or that early. Was it that early? It's 1947. Perfect. Okay. Perfect. That was 2 years before the Russians set off their nuclear weapon, their test. Okay. So the Bulletin of American Scientists has had this doomsday clock forever, and it's how many minutes or how many seconds to midnight are we to nuclear war, the annihilation of the world. And it was a neat, it was kind of a neat selling point or whatever for their message about nuclear arms control and things like this, right? Which is good. And they've always done a really good job with it. And they go back and forth and back and forth. It's a real thing. It is a real thing. But again, it's a marketing campaign of sorts, but it's been around since 1947. Well, Well, they came out and moved the doomsday thing closer to midnight. But what really ticked me off, they moved it closer to midnight than it has ever been. Okay. So what they do is every time there's either a crisis or like arms control treaties and we're a little happier, they move the clock closer to midnight, further away from, in other words, the time on the clock. It could be 5 minutes to midnight. It could be 1 minute to midnight. It could be 30 seconds to midnight, or it could be 10 minutes to midnight, right? So they move it back and forth to indicate how close we are to doomsday, right? Well, they just moved it to the closest point it's ever been to doomsday because of the fighting in Ukraine. Now, exactly, as Ian Bournes just said on TikTok, what about the Cuban Missile Crisis? What about the Berlin crisis? Okay, I mean, just for those. What about the Reagan years? That I don't think were as bad, but there were a couple kind of scary things there. The idea that the Ukraine war, the Russia's war in Ukraine, has us closer to nuclear annihilation than the Berlin crisis, when frankly, literally, I mean, we had barricaded Cuba with a ship embargo, right, to blockade the whole country, and the blockade of Berlin as well. I mean, it's insane. I mean, the two different blockades. That was a showdown. Even North Korea. North Korea is a little scary too. But I mean, give me a break. Give me a freaking break. What bothers me is now they've gone political, because that unfortunately is sucking up to, I think, the political crowd. Yeah, but I think that's sucking up to the political crowd, meaning the far left, but the extremist left, who's this whole, oh my God, if we beat the Russians, we're all going to die. And as of a lot of us have been saying, who are older than two, I lived during the Cold War. I was born in the 1960s. I got to witness enough bad things with the Russians. This ain't nothing. Our relationship with the Russians now ain't nothing like what it was during the Reagan years. The Reagan years, that was a tough time, okay? I wasn't around, well, no, I was not alive yet during the Cuban Missile Crisis, but give me a break. Anyway, somebody wanted me to bring it up, so I brought it up, but that just, this one feels political to me, because I don't think any reasonable person, thank you, who is it, Anthony? Thank you, Anthony, for that. I don't think any reasonable person it's one thing to be very worried with the Ukraine crisis. I'm not very worried, but I can understand how you might be, right? I'm cool with that. But I don't think any credible person who's an expert, and these guys are supposedly experts, could say, oh, this is much more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis. Are you kidding me? I mean, no, thank you, Bonnie. No, what will be much more dangerous than the Cuban Missile Crisis is if Russia sets off a nuclear bomb, and then we've got to decide how to respond. That will be more dangerous. But until that happens, this ain't even close to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Not even close. Anyway, thank you, Marcy, for that. All right, let's jump into the questions, guys. As always, oops, sorry, Sasha. I'm sorry, that was me. Sorry. You okay? My dog was dead asleep. My 13-year-old dog was dead asleep below me. And I was doing okay, let's go, guys. And I went boom, boom, boom on my tabletop, and she's right below me in her bed. And went jumping out of bed, but she gets this like look in her eyes, like that kind of, you just woke up look. So there you go. Okay. I'm covering her up again with a blanket. There we go. She gets another 6 months to sleep. Meg is asking in YouTube Super Chat. Thank you for that, Meg. John, do you anticipate that Ukraine has the capacity to logistically support the tanks that might be headed their way, specifically the M1A1, which is the Abrams, the American tank, as those are a nightmare to maintain? That's the concern. I mean, that's the concern. There were two concerns here with the tanks. One is, in principle, at least, although I'm seeing some dissension here, but in principle, at least, the American tanks are much harder to maintain than the European tanks overall, or the German tanks in particular. The American tanks also are gas guzzlers. They take diesel fuel, but I was reading they can take other fuel too. Either way, they're gas guzzlers, right? So that's a big problem. Thank you, El. So they need a lot more fuel, and more fuel means you've got to get access to the fuel, but also you've got to get the fuel to your tank, right? 50% more fuel going to your tank means 50% more transport, 50% more trucks, 50% more drivers, 50%, right? I mean, it's 50% more runs. So that's more work. Part of the concern here is You're now going to need logistics, jet fuel. Yep. You're going to need separate logistics potentially for the German tanks and the American tanks. You might need different fuel. You're certainly going to need engineers that are trained in one or the other at this point, because, right, how do you do the training on both, at least for now? We need these tanks ready to go by April, right? When this big spring offensive might happen. That doesn't mean you can train on both. I fear you're going to train on one or the other, the American or the German ones. Now you've got double the number of engineers. You've got double the number of logistics. You've got double the number of supplies, right? You not only have the tanks, you've got the spare parts. The spare parts are not the same for the American tank and the German tank. That's the logistical problem, is even if it weren't harder to maintain the American tank, even if it didn't take more fuel, you're doubling up all the logistics are now times two, because they're two different kinds of things, right? That's always been a concern with this war. It's been a concern sort of as we've gone forward, and the Ukrainians are getting more and more weapon systems. They've got artillery from a number of different NATO countries, anti-aircraft stuff. Thank you, Alan John, for the ski goggles. I know there's a lot of the anti-aircraft stuff they're getting, just a lot of different kinds. It's a concern, yeah. Having said that, the Ukrainians have surprised us before. I suspect they're going to know what they're doing, so they should be fine, but it's going to take some work. Yeah. But, it had to be done. I mean, if that's the way we get the German tanks, that's the way we get the German tanks. So I certainly don't, I would say we should, actually, yeah, I'm sorry. Frank Thomas is saying same thing with the UK Challenger 2 tanks. Exactly. The UK is sending tanks. Its tanks as well are going to take, they've got to be trained how to use them, trained how to fix them, trained how to keep them up to date, right? Same problem, or keep them running. I mean, Ben on Super Chat saw on Sky News that some Chinese companies are providing Russia with non-lethal aid, trying to work around Western sanctions. Yes, I read the same story, and what it was saying was that some Chinese companies are basically skirting the sanctions just this side of legal, meaning they're not breaking the law. It doesn't look like it, but they're just at the edge of breaking the law, right? So that the U.S. is worried, and the U.S., I think, has sort of called out China on it. The article did mention at one point that I thought was interesting, that it's not clear if the Chinese themselves are aware of what their companies are doing, which I thought was weird. Now, my guess, though, here's the thing. If the U.S. said that it's not clear the Chinese government is aware of what its companies are doing, we could have been saying that in order to help the Chinese save face, right? Rather than going, China, you horrible country, why are you doing this, right, to the Chinese government, we say, gosh, we've got intelligence that you may not even be aware of. Did you know your companies were doing this? And it lets the Chinese government go, oh my God, that's horrible. We're going to fix it right away. Thank you so much. It gives them an out, so to speak, a diplomatic out, saving face, So hard to say which one's going on, but yeah, I did see it. Jamie J, Super Chat as well. Thank you, guys. Appreciate the Super Chat, guys. Speaking of clocks, can you give your opinion on time being on Russia's side? I feel that once Russia digs in, it will become harder to clear them out. It will be harder to clear them out. The issue in general, okay, with military stuff is it's easier to defend than to attack, okay? You need a lot more troops to attack. Potentially your troops are out in the open, right? Defenders can be hidden. Attackers have to keep trying to move forward, and when they're moving forward, they're out in the open, right? It's just more dangerous, but also they need more troops. I forget by what factor. I'd seen this, whether it's 3 times or what's the number? What's the number for defenders versus attackers? Either way, it takes a lot more. So that's one concern with Ukraine. Well, here's the thing, though. Okay, depends whose offensive you're talking about, right? The Russian offensive is the Russians trying to move forwards 3-1. People are generally saying 3-1. Some are saying 5-1. Okay, but who's offensive, right? If the Russians are going on the offensive, the Russians are trying to take land from the Ukrainians. That makes them the offenders, not the defenders. That means the Russians are in more trouble that way. If the Ukrainians are going on the offense, then, like, for example, the Ukrainians are trying to take, Kremina and Svatove in eastern Ukraine, right north of Bakhmut. The Ukrainians are trying to kick the Russians out. That's going to be more costly for the Ukrainians. So that's going to be part of it too. I did see a couple of reporters saying today, and I wish somebody had asked them why, but nobody explained why. But they said, time is not on Ukraine's side. Now, I think potentially that's true in terms of NATO support eventually, maybe, right? Maybe. Thank you, Ukrainian Alex. I appreciate that. Right? Maybe eventually at this point, things seem to be ramping up nicely in terms of support for Ukraine. I also wonder to what degree time could be on Russia's side, because sure, they're a dictatorship, but they do seem to be worried about their own people turning on them to a degree, which is interesting, So I don't know, but at least I don't know. Thank you, Frank, for that. I'd be curious to see sort of what some of the experts say about, if this goes on for 3 to 5 years, is it really so much easier for the Russians than the Ukrainians at that point? I don't know. Now, mind you, there's also the argument that as the Russians are destroying Ukrainian cities and stuff, how long can Ukraine handle that? Because Ukraine will need more and more economic aid because their own economy is getting destroyed, right? So I don't know. Start scrolling down here. Oops. Let me see. There's a couple different comments here on Twitch because I never get to you Twitch guys. I'll get some Twitch guys and then I'll pull up some of the TikTok comments too. Spire on Twitch is saying Polish army has M1 Abrams and got more in trade from the U.S. for giving the Ukrainians their old T-72s, which were the old Soviet tanks that Poland actually gave, I think, like 200 of their old tanks to Ukraine. Big deal. It was a big deal. My guess is that the Poles will help out with depot level maintenance on the M1s and training the Ukrainians. Oh, no, that's true too. Right. I forgot about that. The Czech Republic is repairing Ukrainian tanks and things. So Ukrainians aren't the only ones that can repair these tanks, right? As long as they can get them out of the country, Poland can help, Czech Republic can help, other countries can help that are nearby. That's a very good point. And Otanbot is saying from Norway, is this the optimal moment to present Russia with an ultimatum to pull out of Ukraine? Pull out or NATO will assert control over the airspace and go in to expel them. Retired Norwegian General Robert Mood thinks so. What's your take on this? I don't think NATO's there, though, because taking over the airspace, the problem is taking over the airspace is very risky. I think we may have to do it if Russia sets off a nuclear bomb. Then I think we probably do have to take over the airspace. But to take over the airspace basically means, it means quite literally, you say, let's say it's all of Ukraine. Actually, I'll take Otanbot's question out of the way so you guys can see. Ukraine says, America, please help us. We don't want anything flying in Ukrainian territory unless it's a plane that we approve of. Help us take control of our airspace, right? So NATO comes in and says, okie dokie, you do a couple things to make sure nothing flies here except your planes. First of all, you've got to take out all of the Russian anti-aircraft missiles. That requires doing two things. One, taking out Russian radar, okay? Because the radar is what they use to lock you, right? To lock the missiles on you. So we would have to literally blow up Russian radar on the ground, which is not only Russian equipment, but there's Russian troops possibly manning that equipment. So we'd be killing Russian soldiers. Two, we would have to blow up Russian anti-aircraft weapons that are on the ground as well. Again, Russian equipment, Russian soldiers that we'd be potentially killing there. Then we would say anything that takes off and flies, we're going to shoot out of the sky. That could be Russian planes, etc. But even if the Russians don't take off, you pretty much have to take out the radar and the anti-aircraft missiles that are on the ground. And to do that, you're potentially killing Russian troops. So that's the only reason why I'd say I'm not quite sure that we're at the point of doing that, because I just think that is literally us saying we're going to blow up Russians versus, hey, we're going to give the Ukrainians the weapons they need. And honestly, I didn't even know about this. I was rather young at the time. But during Vietnam, the Russians were the ones providing all the planes to the North Vietnamese to kill American troops. And I heard some military people bringing it up, because they were like, we don't want to give weapons or planes to Ukraine because it would be escalation and piss off the Russians. The Russians had no problem, killing our soldiers with planes. So, I think it's much safer for us to be able to give the Ukrainians the weapons to do at least some of these things if they can, that's my take. I just think it's too risky, unless, of course, the Russians use a nuke and then we say that's it. We're closing the airspace, right? Because then you've used a nuke, then we've got to take a risk at that point. That's my guess. Let me pull up TikTok. Sorry, guys, TikTok questions here. Oops, turn my phone upside down. TikTok. What do we got here? TikTok. Hi, my. Hello. I follow a nice relaxation guy on TikTok who I really enjoy. So it's always funny, which video comes up first when I go on here. Here it is, Q&A. How does Putin plan to arm and equip a new mobilization? There has to be intel as to where he is getting these items because he doesn't have it now. I mean, that's a very good question. Because we do know that when they mobilized these first, it was like 300,000 troops, right? 300,000 troops, and that the Russians mobilized in September. Thank you, Setterman, for the hat there. They may have only mobilized 200,000 of them. Okay, that was the first thing. Oops, sorry. Yep, Lilia, I'm seeing you now. Let me finish with this, and then I will pull yours up. Sorry about that. I'm just saying. Oh yeah. So the Russians were not able to equip even the 100 or 200,000 troops they had. They weren't able to get them weapons. A lot of the weapons were old. So they weren't able to do training. I mean, a lot of these guys were saying they got no training at all. They just threw them at the border. So that is one of the issues that a lot of the former generals have brought up, American generals, when they've been asked about the idea of Putin doing a larger mobilization. They're saying, it does help to have extra men, even if they're just cannon fodder. I mean, even if they're just bodies you throw at the front to die, it helps, it helps the Russian side a little, but that, as you said, training and getting these guys weapons and then getting them supplies. They also dropped a lot of these guys, and there was no food and water even. They just left them, no sleeping bags, nothing. So yeah, the more Russian troops they bring in, that problem will just be exacerbated, the problem of not being able to provide for them. So no, that's a fair point. Lilia, I'm sorry about that. She's saying, let me see here. I think they mean time as in the relation to the offensive. Ukraine. Oh, Lilia's responding to my question about when I said that a lot of the experts are saying Ukraine's running out of time and we've got to get them, their weapons now. She said, I think they mean time as in relation to the offensive, probably meaning the Russian offensive that we're saying could start as early as April, right? Ukraine still needs to receive the training and supplies. Russia has their equipment right there, and they can throw a bunch of people ill-prepared. Yeah, exactly. Maybe that is what they're talking about then, because that was the big concern in getting this tank issue straightened out, is we are 9 weeks away, more or less 9 weeks away from April 1st. April 1st is pretty much when we think the Russian offensive might start, give or take a week, right? More or less. That 9 weeks isn't a lot of time. Thank you, Hazel, for the train on TikTok. 9 weeks isn't a lot of time in Evolving Fate. Isn't a lot of time to train troops on using a new tank, And like we said, the training them on the logistics, training them on the repair, the upkeep, all that kind of stuff too. So, yeah, no, very, very good point. So looking here. Oh, I see. So he's mentioning the general. Who was it? The admiral again? Thank you, Marie. He's saying the Norwegian military official was saying this is the best way to ensure Ukraine's territorial integrity and end the war before it escalates into a world war. I mean, when it comes down to it, I don't really see an alternative to helping Ukraine win. Anything short of that puts Russia in a position where Russia says, you know what, it was worth it. We got more land, whatever. It's worth invading. Let's do it again once we build up again. I think Russia's a danger no matter what, and I don't see how the war ends. I just don't see it. So I don't know. I see the Russian trolls are pissed off today, aren't they? Well, I don't blame them. I mean, you kind of are screwed. There's a lot of tanks coming your way. A lot of tanks coming your way, folks. Let me see. Let me pull up another TikTok question here for you guys TikTokers. The auction items on Discord. Basically, on Discord, you've got to go click the README, read the comment, click the accept on the bottom, and then the auctions pop up as one of the options on the left. But you've got to read the README first and click I accept or whatever. Let me see here. Yeah, the Mike Pence classified stuff. You know what we can do? We can talk about that. We can go to Discord afterwards for a few minutes. Yesterday, we were there for an hour. I'm not going for an hour today, but we can go to Discord afterwards and have a little bit of an after show, and I can talk about them. They found more classified documents, this time at Mike Pence's home, the former vice president under Trump. So getting kind of interesting. Putin's military people saying we're close to nuclear war. That's because Putin's people are freaking out. They've got nothing left. I mean, they literally, they know they're not doing well. And this tank thing is freaking them out. Now, not only is the tank thing freaking them out because the tanks are bad. I mean, the fact that the Ukrainians are getting tanks, thank you, Happy Beach family, that the Ukrainians are getting tanks from now the Germans and the Americans tanks, which they wanted, is not good news for the Russians. All the Russians can do is try to freak us out in terms of, nuclear war. And then we go, oh my God, maybe we shouldn't help Ukraine, right? So the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists and Glenn Greenwald freak out, and Fox News and Elon Musk, oh my God, war. That's all they've got going for them. So I think whenever you see the Russians talking more about nuclear war, it means the Russians got a report that they're not doing well in the war. That, to me, that's all it means. That's all it means, and they are better tanks than the Russian tanks. Yeah, Stephen Chance is saying, I was hearing that today too. Our tanks are much better than theirs, which is good. Well, and they're getting the Bradley fighting vehicles. They're getting the German Marder, MARDER fighting vehicles, the French light tanks. There's a lot. I mean, it's good. There's a lot going on. Neither side, Ant Coder is saying, why no negotiations? That's actually a good question. Both sides have pretty much said they're not interested in negotiating. The Russians clearly aren't. I mean, they've said they aren't. The Ukrainians are basically saying that, both sides are kind of in the same position. Okay. From the Ukrainian position, what do you negotiate? Russia's controlling 18% of your country, or 20%, 18% of your country. How do you negotiate that? Right? Because the Russians are going to say, okay, we'll give you 5% back. If you're Ukraine, you want it all back. So it's not right. It's not really, you can't really negotiate. That is the problem, right? From a Russian perspective, Putin still wants to win. Putin still thinks he can get all of Ukraine. He still thinks he can get Kyiv. So neither party is really interested in negotiating right now. But the problem is for the Ukrainians, I don't blame the Ukrainians, because how do you negotiate getting rid of your land? And frankly, the Ukrainians could win this if we give them the right weapons. They're good. I mean, again, it's not just our weapons. We armed and trained the Iraqis and the Afghanis for 20 years, and they didn't do very well, right? We trained the Ukrainians. All of us collectively helped train the Ukrainians for 8 years, and the Ukrainians are doing a great job, a great job. No, the thing with Putin too is Putin would like to pretend he's going to negotiate. Putin would love to have negotiations happen right now. And let's just freeze everything for a bit. Let's get together. We'll have tea. We'll talk for a few weeks, maybe a few months, and we'll just have a ceasefire the whole time. And while that ceasefire is happening, all the exhausted Russian troops are resting. They're bringing in fresh troops. They're bringing in new weapons. They're bringing in food and water. They're digging in their defenses so that Ukraine can't get its land back. So that is why, if anything, now the Russians aren't interested in negotiations anyway, but if they were to negotiate, that's why you also hear people talking about a ceasefire, and you hear Ukraine's defenders going, are you crazy? I mean, all a ceasefire does is help the Russians catch their breath and dig in while and so that it's going to be even harder to get rid of them later. So All right, let me do the quick summary. I do a quick little recap of the news where I talk about what we talked about today briefly. And then, as I said, we'll go over to the Discord just for a little bit, not too long tonight, since yesterday was an hour. It was fun, but it was an hour. And then we'll go from there. All right. So today's news, we said it looks like Germany and the U.S. are both going to approve sending tanks to Ukraine this week. We may hear as early as tomorrow, actually, from both countries, which is really cool. I was saying the tanks matter because of spring offensives. It looks like Ukraine and the Russians both may be planning some big attacks in the spring. They need tanks for that, or Ukraine needs tanks for both, whether they're attacking or defending. In other news, the New York Times reports that the U.S. is going to be ramping up its artillery shell production by a factor of six times to help provide Ukraine enough artillery. Switzerland may allow the re-export of its weapons to Ukraine, which would be a big deal. It's being worked on in Parliament right now. As part of a growing anti-corruption campaign, Zelensky fired 4 governors, and one of the top deputies at the infrastructure military is now under arrest. Sky News reports that the Russians who wish to leave Russia now have to reserve the date and time of their leaving, or they will. I'm sorry, this is a new legislative proposal that they will have to under this proposal. The United Nations says Russia lied about Ukraine storing military equipment at nuclear plants. Ukraine, in fact, is not storing the equipment. The United Nations went into the plants and looked and said, ain't nothing there. 2 British aid workers, Chris Perry and Andrew Bagshaw, we now know were killed in Soledar while attempting to rescue an elderly woman when they were hit by a Russian artillery shell. And per Sky News, Prigozhin, who is the Russian oligarch, has asked the Kremlin to ban negative media reports about the Wagner Group. Woo! Oh, and I saw Paula some goggles. Thank you, Paula, for that. All right, guys. Okay. I am calling it quits. It's 7:02. And I'll go over to the Discord for a while. Otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow night. Was it Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern? And we'll continue. And also, do follow me on TikTok and YouTube. On YouTube, TikTok especially, I put updates throughout the day, news updates. You can look at my TikTok right now, and you'll see a couple of the stories we talked about, like the tanks, I kind of delved into throughout the day. Do check that out. But please do come by tomorrow again, 6 p.m. Eastern, and join us again. Otherwise, go to discord.aravosis.com, and I will meet you guys there shortly. But thank you, as always, for the gifts, guys. I very much appreciate it. And thank you, mods, for all that you do. I was watching a lot of the fun little crazy Russian trolls today. They were fun, as always. But oh man, I'm tired again. I'm always tired, you know me. Oh man. All right, guys, have a very good night, and I will see you guys at Discord for a little bit. Okay. All right. Good night, YouTube.